come. And I'll share my screen. All right, great. So what we're going to talk about tonight is gerrymandering, what it is and how to fix it. So you may have seen this graphic before. This is the image of the first gerrymander. Someone thought that it looked like a salamander. This was in 1810. And the governor of the state at the time was Elbridge Gerry. And so that's where the term gerrymandering came from combining the name Gary and salamander. So that's where that comes from. And that's what we're talking about tonight. So my name is Jenelle Ludwig-Krause. I'm an organizer with an organization called Pierce County Grassroots Organizing. And I'm here with Douglas.
And I'm a volunteer with Western Wisconsin Nonpartisan Voting District. And we have a team of people working on legislative issues. I live in Dunn County, just a little bit north of Menominee.
Yeah, and I live in St. Croix County. So we're all in Western Wisconsin. So Western Wisconsin for Nonpartisan Voting District, the group that Douglas and I are a part of, launched in July of 22. We work in collaboration with some of the local chapters of the League of Women Voters, and we're a member of the Fair Maps Coalition. We'll tell you more about that. We're nonpartisan, we're local, and we're interested in building grassroots power to bring an end to gerrymandering in Wisconsin. So what we're going to talk about today is gerrymandering and its impact, first and second tier solutions, and then what we can do, and then we'll open up for questions. But as I said, we're such a small group. If you have a question, just feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat and we can dive right in.
So we're going to cover gerrymandering and its impact. And these are some terms that we often hear: the gerrymandering, nonpartisan, just redistricting, fair maps, and we're going to cover some explanation for those. The basics of district maps are that the federal legislation established that every 10 years, the states were to redraw their congressional and legislative district maps based on the census that's done for everyone that lives in the United States. This year, those numbers will probably become available in later summer. And the purpose is to make sure that each district has fairly even populations throughout the United States. Each district then will send a representative or state senator to the state government, as well as the federal, congressional, and US senators. So what's gerrymandering? Jenelle gave a little explanation for the derivation of the words, but it amounts to one party intentionally drawing district boundaries to gain an advantage based on how those boundaries are drawn. We'll get more information about how to do that here in a moment. Nonpartisan redistricting is using methods that are based on the compactness of the district, geography, communities of interest, or just municipal lines. And fair maps is another way of characterizing nonpartisan redistricting. Just more fair than gerrymandering. So as a way of explaining this, the Wisconsin Farmers Union put together this short video, and we're going to play just the first 2 minutes of that. It moves fast, but we'll go back and cover some of these terms.
Over the last several years, Wisconsin has repeatedly made national news for having some of the most gerrymandered maps in the nation. Let's take a look at what that means. State lawmakers represent the people who reside in a defined area called the legislative district. Wisconsin's legislative districts, created by the majority party in the legislature in 2011, were found by federal courts in November 2016 and in January 2017 to be an unconstitutional political gerrymander that unfairly dilutes the votes of over half the state's citizens in violation of both the First and the 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. The current partisan map was purposely drawn to favor one political party. Using computer modeling and sophisticated data algorithms, legislators in the majority party pack voters of the opposing party into as few districts as possible, so the minority wins big in those districts, but doesn't win many overall. On top of creating some oddly shaped districts, this also sets the stage for extreme partisanship. Elected officials don't hear from constituents with other points of view because they've all been drawn into other districts. In fact, the districts have been drawn to so heavily favor the incumbent that new candidates don't even bother to run for office. In 2016, 38 of 99 state assembly candidates ran unopposed in the general election. For democracy to thrive, we need competitive legislative districts and real elections. Not only does partisan gerrymandering poison our democracy, it's expensive, and Wisconsin taxpayers are footing the bill. Rather than drawing fair, nonpartisan districts, Wisconsin has spent over $4 million to defend the current gerrymandered maps. Tax dollars should be used for public needs like roads, schools, and infrastructure, not to defend political battles the majority of citizens do not support.
The soundtrack's a little annoying, but some good facts there. So just as a review, that gerrymandering rigs our districts such that one party is able to make the decisions without being accountable to the constituents, no matter what their political affiliation. It decreases competition, so less people run for office, as the video mentioned. It deprives us of equal representation, has cost $4 million trying to defend those really inappropriate maps, and it leads to this extreme partisanship. So some polling was done by the Marquette Law School, and it shows that even though 72% of Wisconsinites supported nonpartisan redistricting, the legislature still voted against that change to allow nonpartisan process. 75% of Wisconsinites supported expanding special education funding. Legislature voted that down. 70% of Wisconsinites supported adopting expansion of Medicaid. Legislature voted that down. 81% of Wisconsinites support increasing background checks for firearm sales, and the legislature didn't even take a vote on that. So this video does a really nice job of explaining how, even though there's the same number of players on the two
Partisan
sides,
redistricting.
Oops, sorry. Go for it.
that just by drawing different boundaries, different majorities are either side it becomes a majority.
Partisan redistricting, or gerrymandering, is about fractions, percentages. These coins represent voters in an evenly divided state, 50 dimes, 50 pennies. They elect 10 representatives. That means each district map must contain 10 coins. Of course, real people don't live in neat rows, so let's mix them up. This is our hypothetical state. Let's see what happens if the dimes draw the maps. 10 coins in each district.
So first thing we do is pack the pennies. Give them 2 safe districts, but pack them solid. The remaining 8 districts are won by the dimes, by smaller but still comfortable margins. The dimes win 8 districts and the pennies win 2. The dimes overwhelmingly control the legislature.
Of course, if the pennies drew the district lines, the opposite could happen. Let's rig it for the pennies.
For the pennies, we pack the dimes into 2 safe districts and crack the remaining 8 districts and win by the same margin, 8-2.
Well, now that we've destroyed democracy, let's consider how this would look if the maps were drawn based on compactness and keeping communities of interest together. You get evenly divided districts in an evenly divided state. There are some that go heavily dime, there are some that go penny, but that's to be expected. People live where they live, and that's what democracy is about. It's not about party bosses rigging elections for them.
So now we've learned how gerrymandering happens through packing and cracking. If I can go to the next slide, there we go. Through packing and cracking. And so we're just going to take a quick look at what that is like for us in Wisconsin. So I want to show you, on the left is our congressional districts that we had from 2003 to 2013. I'm in Congressional District 7, so this light blue in the top left, northwest of Wisconsin. And so you can see that from 2003 to 2013, it was a fairly straight line, so on the southern part of that district. And then moving into 2013, that became a very jagged line. And this is sometimes what it looks like when you're packing and cracking. You're going to get the voters that you want, and you're excluding the ones, or you're including the ones you want and excluding the ones you don't want in a very precise way. And this has been helped a lot by computers and voting data that is really precise. And so you can see how that is played out for us in Wisconsin. A couple other examples of what this looks like. Douglas lives in Dunn County. Dunn County has a population of about 46,000 people, and an assembly district is about 57,000 people. And so Dunn County, in theory, could be one county with a little bit of extra around it. That could be one assembly district, but instead Dunn County has been divided into 4 different assembly districts, which makes it really hard to, build relationships with your legislators and get them to act on things that are important for that county, because you have to deal with 4 different legislators, and those legislators are also dealing with completely, other counties. For example, District 75 is mostly Barron County, so they might not feel quite as inclined. The representative from that assembly district may not feel quite as inclined to pay attention to the little tiny bit of Dunn County that happens to be in their district. So you can see how this can cause a lot of a lot of problems for constituents like us trying to get the change that we need. And one saying that has been used to describe this is that politicians are choosing their voters instead of voters choosing their politicians. So they're drawing the lines to pick who they want to vote for them, to give them safe seats. And I live in St. Croix County, and we have a very similar concern here, which is that we're divided in 4 different assembly districts. Now, St. Croix County has a population of 90,000, 92,000 or something like that. And so it's definitely going to be split between at least 2 assembly districts, but it's probably not necessary to divide it into 4. So that's a little look at Wisconsin. I wanted to mention as well, we've been talking about political gerrymandering so far. There's also racial gerrymandering, and this is when, instead of picking Democrats or Republicans and being careful exactly where you're putting them to make the districts in favor of your political party, the same has been done for races. So, for example, putting, if there's a heavily African-American Black neighborhood, it could be cut up into 5 different assembly districts to diminish the power. So those same tools have been used to diminish the voice of people of color. And one good example of this is what happened in Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan had basically no political representation specific for them, and they ended up having the water problem. And so that you know, sometimes we think, oh, the line goes here, the line goes there, does it matter that much? But in the end, you can completely disenfranchise a whole community by doing that.
This is another poll that was done by the Marquette University Law School, and it shows very clearly that in 2019, the percentage of people that support either the legislature and the governor drawing the maps was only 18% versus 72% that supported a nonpartisan commission. And again, in 2020, similar results. Across the state, almost every county has voted on referendums that support fair maps. Every time the voters have been asked, the percentages have been like you see here on the right side of this slide in the 60 to 70% range. And just recently, Ashland, Buffalo, Polk, and Richland counties have passed most recently the referendum. A little bit earlier, St. Croix County and Dunn County also passed it with similar percentages of at least 2/3, if not 3/4 of the voters supporting fair maps.
So we know that this is something the people of Wisconsin want to change from those percentages and those referendums. And so now we're going to dig into how we can make that change. Any questions before we move into this next section? Not, I'm just going to dive right in. So we're going to talk about two different ways to create change. I'm going to start by talking about having more representative districts this time around. The census was last year, so we're drawing maps this year. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then when I'm done with that, Douglas will talk about the second way that we can make a difference, which is through new legislation. So I'm going to put a couple links in the chat for you. The People's Map Commission was created by Governor Tony Evers, and it's a commission of 9 people. None of them have been elected before, and they have a nonpartisan role. So it's a nonpartisan committee to draw the maps. So it's an example of how this could be done in the future. And their task is to prepare maps for the legislature, to listen to the publics, and then to draw maps and to develop a transparent process. So besides making maps that won't be gerrymandered and taking input from the public and doing all of this in a very transparent way, they're also going to write a report at the end and say how that goes so that we can decide in the future if that's a good model for us to use and maybe make a law that would require that. So
the commission has represented each congressional district.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there are 9 commission, one commissioner for each congressional district. Yep. So they have done one hearing in each of the congressional districts, and you can still go back and listen to all of them if you would like. They've got draft criteria. Actually, as we speak right now, they're finalizing the criteria. They're going to vote on it tonight. So we'll know exactly what criteria they're going to use for drawing the maps. And next, what they would like to do is collect information on communities of interest. So I mentioned earlier that a county like St. Croix County, where I live, is going to have to be divided because we have more than 57,000 people in the county. And what collecting community of interest information allows them to do is to say, oh, you know, there's definitely a clear line as to where this county should be divided, because maybe the people in the south all shop down to the south and the people in the north shop to the north. And so they want to collect a lot of that information from us, people who live in the communities, so that they know how best to make that change. So welcome, Kristen.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
No worries. Welcome.
Jenelle, you can listen to the beginning as well.
Pardon me?
Jenelle will send out the link with the recording so you can listen to the beginning as well.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. The other thing that the People's Map Commission would love to get is we can submit maps. So if you have any good ideas of how to draw a map, you can go ahead and submit that. And I put the People's Map Commission link in the chat. You can click way over to the right on their webpage where it says contact the commission and submit comments, a map, your community of interest in that way. And I've put this in here, I'll send this out afterwards, what a community of interest is, because that's something a question that a lot of people have. And so I've put the official definition here, so you can review that later. The communities of interest are going to be collected in software called Districtor, and our project, Western Wisconsin for Nonpartisan Voting District, will help anyone that wants to put their community of interest in Districtor. It's pretty easy once you get a hang of it, and we can do it on Zoom or in person. So a little bit about the timeline. We said that the census was last year. So right now we're waiting for the census numbers. They'll probably come out about mid-August. When those numbers come out, then both the People's Map Commission and the legislature will draw maps. And the People's Map Commission, as you know, is doing it in an open, transparent way, and are using specific criteria that do not include voter history. And then the legislature may draw maps that are very similar to what we have now, or they might be different. We don't know yet, but it's likely that the maps that the legislature creates will be vetoed by Governor Evers. And when that happens, then the maps will probably be decided in the courts, which has happened before, and which, as Douglas mentioned, cost us $4 million last time around. And I just have on here too that the deadline for having new maps is April 2022. So even though the maps will probably be presented by the People's Map Commission and the legislature in August or September, it's possible that it'll be a little bit of a drawn out process before we actually have the new district maps.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I know you said at the DEM meeting where I was at this last weekend, something about they already have an attorney for this, or maybe Carol Skinner said that they already have an attorney. They're like planning on taking this to court, right?
Yeah, this will go to court. Yeah, yes.
Do we as well? Like, do we have the same backing? Do we have an attorney? Do we have like, how is this going to go down in court?
Yeah, so you're right. The legislature has already engaged a law firm, and there was a lot of controversy over that because they're paying a $200,000 retainer per month, which is our taxpayer money.
Are you kidding me?
No, no. They've been taken to court by a teachers union in Madison. So that's to be determined. The teachers union is claiming that it's illegal to hire a law firm before there's any litigation in process. So we'll see how that comes out, but they have. So your question is perfect timing, because we do have a law firm in Wisconsin that is poised and prepared to take up any litigation that comes about the maps. So Law Forward, check it out, their website. They have 2 highly experienced attorneys that will be fighting this in the courts, and you can sign up for their newsletters. They do periodic updates on Zoom like this, and very, very informative, great resource. So I encourage you to.
So how does that work? Are they on retainer as well, or?
No. They're a law firm that exists and that knows that this will probably go to the courts, and so they're prepared. Some of the attorneys have participated in past court cases. You may recall that within the last 10 years, there were a few court cases, one that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. So some of the attorneys from that are still available and just ready to take action when the time comes.
They're a private, public interest group that's funded by donations, not the legislature.
Okay.
They're not funded by taxpayers. Yeah, through donations. Yeah, good point, Douglas.
Okay, so a link to that group would be a link to, like, I would be willing to share a link to donate to this group.
Yeah, I'll put them back. I'll put them in the chat again.
Okay, I'm sorry, because when I joined late, I'm so sorry. I
No.
won't even ask any more questions.
You should. You
But
should.
then the chat before I came isn't there. So
Yeah, no worries. Don't worry about asking questions. And Douglas, I saw Tim had a question. Is there anything else to answer there, or is that?
He just mentioned that he doesn't have a microphone. So I just encouraged him to write questions in the chat.
Okay, I see your question. I think, Tim, that says, because Wisconsin is so gerrymandered to the right already, and the right-leaning Supreme Court in Wisconsin and the US have already allowed gerrymandering to continue, is there a realistic hope of ever getting nonpartisan districting to happen? Okay, that's a great question. I would say that there are 4 main things that are different this time around than last time. So in 2013, 2011, 2012, when we got these maps that we have now, one, all 3 parts of the government were from the same party. So that historically has been a weak point for gerrymandering. If all 3 branches of the government are the same party is controlling them, then it's a lot easier for them to get something through. So this time, the Assembly and the Senate are run by Republicans, but the governor is a Democrat. So that's already one difference this time around than last time around, because last time there was no governor to veto, and this time it'll most likely be vetoed. The second thing I would say is that there was really very little or no grassroots involvement last time. This happened when some people I know that are working on our project were already involved and concerned at the time, but I wasn't. I had no clue this was happening. And many of us in Wisconsin had no idea what was happening, and it just happened super, super fast. And all of a sudden it was a done deal. And it wasn't until several years later that we realized what had happened. So right now, the fact that so many people in Wisconsin are concerned about this, it matters. We can call our legislators. I just talked to an aide of my assembly person, Clint Moses, today, who said that he's received a lot of calls on this and he's trying to figure out what he wants his position to be. So that's something that we can do on the grassroots level. The other thing I would say is this law firm. So there's a law firm that's already ready and thinking ahead to what are we going to do? And then the fourth thing is the People's Map Commission. So now we have an example of a good way of making maps, and the legislature will get a presentation of what their conclusions were and what map they've drawn. And then also in the court case, because it's probably going to end up in court, we actually have an example to show up to say this is a good map. Whereas last time around, we had nothing to contrast it. We were just like, this is a bad map, we need to make it better. Whereas now we actually have a real example. So because of those 4 things that are really different this time around than last time around, we don't have all the power, definitely, to make change, but we have significantly more than we had last time around.
The veto power.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So hopefully that answers your question and put any more in here that you have. So great questions. Now I'll pass it over to Douglas.
So I just want to emphasize that a big difference between the nonpartisan system and the way the Republicans did it last time was that they relied on voting records. And this People's Map Commission will not look at the past voting records of registered voters to determine where the boundaries should be. So we have a couple of things coming up. A bill that will be introduced shortly, probably from Senator Jeff Smith, who's from our region. And the legislation will seek to establish this nonpartisan commission on a continuing basis. So every 10 years, this commission will exist, and it will form maps that were not based on past voting records, but on more fair principles. It's based on what has been done in Iowa for the last 4 different census periods without any need for litigation. No lawsuits were filed. And Republicans actually established that model with the idea that they wanted to save on court costs. They wanted it to be simple and fair. So we want to encourage each one of you to get in touch with both your Wisconsin State Assembly member and your state senator. Easy to find out who those are if you don't know, and ask them to support this new legislation. It's really critical that we get Republican support on the bill that initially introduced by Senator Smith, who's a Democrat. If we get Republican sponsors, then we can see that legislation move ahead. There's also a federal legislation moving that's passed the House. It's in the awaiting action in the Senate. It's House Bill number 1 for the People Act, and it strengthens voting rights. It eliminates gerrymandering of congressional districts. It requires states to use the nonpartisan commission approach to establish the congressional district boundaries. And then those parameters would be population equality, compliance with the National Voting Rights Act, respect communities of interest, and that's not limited to just ethnic criteria, with respect for political divisions of the state, and with no undue advantage to any party. So an interesting thing is that just recently, in the last couple of days, the Wisconsin legislature has introduced 4 different bills that would restrict voting rights. And that's another example of the freedom of the people to offer legislation that's so contradictory to what the majority of people desire. It's only possible because of gerrymandered districts.
All right, great. So now we know there are 2 ways that we can create change. One, we have the redistricting happening this year, and thanks to Law Forward and the People's Map Commission and the governor's veto and people like you and I, we can make change. And then the second thing is the new legislation that will be introduced shortly and that we should help promote with our legislators. So we're going to give you a quick recap of what we can do to move this forward. One is you can submit your community of interest, and I'll send you a follow-up email after this call, and you can just hit reply and say, Jenelle, I would like to submit my community of interest. So that's an option for you. Next, like Douglas just said, contact your legislators. Really, it makes a huge difference. Even though we know a lot of our legislators aren't listening to constituents, we can do a Freedom of Information Act request, and we will, to see how many Wisconsinites have contacted their legislators on this topic. So the more that are contacted, then we can say, hey, look, we know 70, 80,000 people contacted you, pay attention. So don't just brush that off because we're gerrymandered and you're afraid it won't make a difference. It is really important.
Okay, so you were just showing Ron Johnson and Tammy Baldwin. When I typed in my address, Rob Staffschulte and Shannon Zimmerman come up.
Perfect. Yeah. So sorry, this slide's maybe a little too much on one side. So at the state level, you should contact Shannon and Rob because they're your state assembly and Senate representatives. So
Okay.
they're in Wisconsin.
Yes.
So that's what's happened at the Wisconsin level. That bill that Douglas mentioned is going to be introduced by Jeff Smith to create a nonpartisan committee to draw the lines. That's at the state level. At the national level is that for the people legislation. And so that's why for the People's Act, you would contact Ron Johnson and Tammy Baldwin.
Okay, and so for as far as what you're going to be requesting records on, you're going to be wondering who contacts Ron Johnson and Tammy Baldwin, or Rob Staffschulte and Shannon Zimmerman?
The latter, Rob Staffschulte and Shannon Zimmerman, the Wisconsin level. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Thank you. That's
Sorry.
a good,
Sorry, I'm asking so many questions.
no, it's a good clarifying question. I should maybe put these on 2 different slides because it can be a little confusing.
Okay.
They're not stupid questions, no.
No. And we'd like to invite you to ask 3 friends to come to this next presentation. We have another one. We're doing them every month. The next one is May 20th, and I'll put this in the follow-up email too, but I'll put it in the chat now in case you want to grab it right away. But the next one will be on May 20th. And, you know, gerrymandering, as you know from this call, it's not super straightforward. We hear these words all the time: fair maps, redistricting, gerrymandering, but it takes a little bit of time to wrap our minds around it. And so that's why we're offering these little short intro courses. And we'd love for as many people in Wisconsin as possible to be well informed and able to make maximum change.
Yeah, we have a lighter turnout tonight, so we're going to up this to 10.
Really appreciate you guys doing this, honestly, because I feel like this is something I should have learned in high school, but I probably just wasn't paying attention. And so I feel like I'm trying to learn now that it matters to me, I'm trying to learn it, right?
Yeah.
You also have to recognize that we're in a different world. That at the former world, there was a sense of propriety, a sense of following rules in fairness, and a process that honored all sides, as opposed to a minority trying to control just the majority of people.
Yeah, I'll say too that it's not only people, it's also I mean, I agree entirely, and I'd say on top of that, it's also just computational power and data. You know, 40 years ago or 20 years ago, we didn't have the computational power we have now to draw districts so specifically, and we didn't have the amount of data on each of us. You know, they have a tremendous amount of data, where we shop, what magazines we subscribe to, like all sorts of data that makes it really, really easy for people to know who we voted for and where we stand on the political spectrum. So all of that together makes a pretty powerful tool for gerrymandering.
We can also say that it's not restricted to Republicans. Democrats have done their own share of gerrymandering in the past. And what my point is that in the current climate, it seems people are more willing to step outside of standards and go just run over the rule of law and go for ridiculous legislation that controls the right of people to vote. It's sad.
So the fourth thing that we would like to ask you is consider joining a group like ours, Western Wisconsin for Nonpartisan Voting Districts. We're nonpartisan, we're local, we have teams. Douglas works on a team that's our legislative team. So they're putting together resources. You can contact a legislator as part of a team instead of on your own. You can get training. And so you can get a lot more support. And then I work with a team that supports the People's Map Commission. So I'll be collecting communities of interest and doing things like that. So if this is something that you're passionate about, you know, this is really short term right now, like between now and April of next year, and maybe not even that long. It's something that requires our attention right now so that we can make sure to have change. So I'll send you a follow-up email, and if you'd like to talk more about it or learn more about our group, just let me know and we'll set up a time to talk one-on-one. I would love to do that with you. So that's about it. I will stop sharing now and see if there are any other questions anyone has. Did we cover them all as we went?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for having this presentation. It's such a it's a hard to grasp topic, and so it's just having it broken down is just really incredibly helpful, and I really appreciate the information.
Yeah, if you're aware of other groups that you think would be interested in hearing this presentation, let us know, because we're happy to keep giving it.
I'm going to absolutely share your next one as well. I have a group of people I can share it with. So I'm
Excellent.
going to encourage people to learn about this, because yeah, I think it is kind of one of those terms that are like, oh yeah, gerrymandering. I think I don't like that, but I don't know what I can do about it. Right. So it's good to know.
And these next few months here are critical. That's the point that we're trying to make, is that if you want to get involved now, between now and September is the critical time.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you everyone very much. You'll get an email follow-up from me shortly, and I'm happy to talk with you more, engage in whatever ways, or give you more resources if you have more questions. So just let us know, and thank you for spending some time learning about gerrymandering and fair maps tonight.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Good evening.